making plans for Nigel. This boy is electric.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the EV Puzzle. As you probably know, if you follow me on the channel, especially on Twitter, you'll have seen that we've been test driving the Mini Aceman. We've now tested all three. We've driven the Mini Countryman and the Mini Aceman. All of them share the same round OLED screen, more advanced media system that you'll have seen Mini talking about a lot. There's a lot of positives about it, but I think it nearly caused an accident for us on our test drive. In fact, I wish I'd have caught it on camera because it would have been a great piece of dramatic footage, but to be honest, it was a pretty scary moment, and that's worth talking about. It's worth talking about these new systems that are screen-based, software-driven. Are they safe? Is it better to have a car where things are controlled on a screen, or should we still have buttons for certain things? Now, I guess it's becoming an old discussion really, isn't it? Those that like buttons, those that don't. I mean, what are the benefits? Let's talk practically. Well, quite simply, it's about cost saving for the manufacturer. It might save a quid off the price of the car, which they don't pass on to us typically, so to the customer it's no benefit at all, apart from you have a less cluttered screen. Unlike the 1980s or 90s with cars like this Jaguar with buttons everywhere, the idea now is like a Tesla. You don't have any buttons, it's all based on the screen, even for opening things like the glove box. But let's be devil's advocate here. If holding a mobile phone and looking at it in my line of sight so I'm not distracted from the road, if that's illegal, why is looking down and across at a screen still legal? Because it's the operation of the car. On a mobile phone, it's not the operation of the car, but the thing that you're doing, you are moving your eyes from looking ahead at the road and you're looking elsewhere into your car to control the car. Is that a good thing? Now, some people will say, well, you get used to it. And it's intuitive once you give it a chance, or once you learn how the menus work and what the shortcuts are. And there's lots of variations of the screens, and some of the screens are higher up, almost in front of the windscreen, some of them are lower down, some of them are portrait and flatter, some of them are round, some of them stretch across the width of the screen. So there's different ways of implementing the screens, there's different ways of implementing the touch surfaces, whether they're haptic, whether they're touch surfaces, whether they are gesture controlled. So as you move your hand towards it, then something occurs on the screen or the menus or whatever. It becomes easier to use. So there's differences in how these things are implemented, but the basics are you're looking ahead at the road and you're having to look across, or you're having to look across and down and move your arms down to touch things. So is it a good thing or isn't it? Because it doesn't impact the NCAP safety ratings. Depending on your controls and whether they are button-based or screen-based, does not impact the safety of the car. And yet what we experienced in the car, let's get to that straight away, was a significant safety moment. Susan driving in the car, me in the passenger seat, I tell Susan, let's try the screen out, change the heating controls, put the fan speed up a little bit. So what does Susan have to do? She's looking ahead, looking at the road, two hands on the steering wheel. Now let's qualify this. This is Lincolnshire on a fenny type road which has potholes and undulations because it's built on a peat base which is below sea level probably. So it does tend to move and does tend to undulate a fair bit. But it wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the best either. So really you did need two hands on the steering wheel. The Mini Aceman as well is quite light on the steering, and it does steer very quickly. It moves quickly, which is great from a driving perspective. You know, every little input gives you a direction change of the car, and you might be cottoning on to what actually happened here. Susan driving along takes one hand off the steering wheel, looking where she's going, but then has to look across and look down, and as she's doing it, look what's happening here. The twist of the shoulders, this arm goes up, when it shouldn't do, this one. So that's holding the steering wheel, and yes, we move towards the curb with the ditch, 6-foot ditch, soft mud at the edge. If you catch a wheel in that, you're in the ditch, and you're going to be in your worst scenario, water around you as well. A really unpleasant thing. Now, I saw that the car was moving, and I shouted to Susan really, really quickly to get back two hands on the wheel, and she didn't actually manage to change the heating controls. Now partly it's because she wasn't experienced with the car and what to do with it, and where the heated controls were. Partly it was because of an undulating road. We were doing 40, 45 miles an hour, so nothing serious at all. Yes, there was traffic coming the other way, but it's quite simple. Not looking straight ahead, looking across and down can cause you to change your arm movements, and if the car reacts quickly, if the road has undulations, you could be off in an instant. And I tell you, that was a scary moment for us. It was bloody close to us not getting the car back to the dealership. So from the perspective of actually having experienced this, I'm not a fan of heater controls on screens only, especially when you've got this round screen or this screen in front of you, but they choose to put the menu at the bottom. So let's look at this. What we've got is, rather than the ergonomic of button controls and car manufacturers deciding where things go, and they're used to all of that, we're talking about software developers now. And mostly software developers are being told, from what I can see, to make it look nice, to make it look aesthetically nice. And with Mini especially, that is their focus of this screen. It's about colours, it's about images, it's about making it look nice. But in a lot of cars, the heater controls are at the bottom. So on the Mini, we've got these 4 or 5 button positions on the bottom of the round screen, and I kid you not, the button sizes are less than the tip of my finger. Now, I have slightly shaky fingers, and if I'm on a bumpy road as well, the chance of me actually hitting that button first time and getting it to work, it's just not going to happen. You're going to have multiple stabs, which means you're going to be looking across at it for longer, which makes it more dangerous. So that's not a good thing either. Yes, you can do a swipe up of the screen and get some shortcuts, and you could have something programmed on the shortcut, or you have the little side controls at the side. So as well as pressing a button to get the bigger button system, the bigger climate control screen, so the whole OLED screen is used for controlling the heating and ventilation system, you've got little sliders at the side that can do it. But again, they're so small that on a bumpy road with fingertip control, that was what Susan was aiming to do. She couldn't get to it accurately without coming off the road. So for me, the Mini system does not work. The only time it'll work is when you've used it for quite a long time, you really get used to it, and I don't know, ideally what you want is to be able to rest your wrist on something to get accuracy, to be able to move your finger, but you don't have that in the Mini. There's nowhere to rest your wrist to actually get accurate fingertip movements. So I personally think moving away from buttons onto screens is a really bad thing if it's not designed well. Why aren't the heater controls higher up so your eyesight is more with the road? Because that's where the speedo is, and they can't put everything at the top. So that's part of the issue, isn't it? So the size of the screen, if it's portrait and oblong, that means the lower parts are even worse. If it's round, you don't have as much space. It's not a practical design screen. You want it longer and oblong, really, don't you? To have more space at that top row to be able to use the functionality. So for me, this is common sense. If it's less reliable than using a button or a dial or a physical switch, if the chance of you getting the interaction right first time is less with a screen, then it's worse. If you have to look further away from the road, then it's worse. Another good example is my Mini Electric. So I've got a level 3 Mini Electric with an optional button for heated steering wheel. Now that button is not visible at all while I'm driving, but I know where it is, and touching and feeling, I can go under the steering wheel, press the button, turn on the heated steering wheel, and my eyes do not leave the road at all. But I do have to go one-handed. Now that is much better than looking away, swiping up a screen, pressing a favourite function of turning on the heat seater, or the other way, looking down across, pressing the heating ventilation, then pressing the heated seat button. So there's more interactions looking away as well. It is more dangerous, it is more difficult, it is more likely to not be performed perfectly first time than with a button or switch. So I'm really against it. I do not like cars that do not give you access to the commonly used features as physical buttons. So I would buy an older car rather than a new one if that technology was there, because they haven't advanced the technology right, and their priorities are more about the manufacturing and the look of things than actually the practicality. What I'd like to see is the ease and accuracy of using the screen, and whether it is cumbersome or takes multiple attempts, reflected into the safety scores. I'd like it to be honest about it, and that would then encourage them to stop looking at how pretty things look and then go back to making things more functional. So what do you think? Do you like buttons? Do you like the screens? Do you like the simplicity of no buttons available and just want it all on a screen? But then you've got the situation, haven't it? If you know your car and you know where everything is, that's great. What about when someone gets in it for the first time? What about it's your first week driving the car and you're not sure where things are? You know, it only takes one accident, so it should be intuitive, it should work easily all of the time. To have something so different and you actually have to look away, but then combine that with a steering system that is moving the car on the slightest of inputs, and it's very light steering. To me, it's just a recipe for disaster. So that Mini, with the poor positioning of the controls for the heating and ventilation, and the inaccuracy of you can jab it multiple times and not get it to actually do what you want, I would be very interested to see over a period of time how many accidents are actually caused by the implementation of that system, to provide no benefit back to the customer financially, but just to make financial benefits back to the car manufacturer. Yeah, I'm not a fan at all. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about this video. It is a shame that I didn't have the footage, but then again, if I was filming on camera, would I have said to Susan on time to actually watch what she's doing because she was about to go in a ditch? It really was bloody close, and it was just that dipping of the shoulder, moving of the steering, just a little bit on a bumpy road, and we would have been off. It could have been a disaster. So yeah, I thought I'd share that with you because it was a scary moment and it is worth a discussion. What do you think? Is it the right thing? Personally, I've seen some good heating and ventilation controls. When it's a big screen with big buttons on the screen, then that works well. And the gesture controls as well can be a really good thing. You know, we should be able to perhaps just swipe our hand or move our hand into an airspace, and then the menus change on a screen. It should be accurate, and it should be intuitive, and it should cater for a percentage of error. So a tiny little button on the bottom of the screen, Mini on a round screen. Forget your bloody round screens and your colours and your little graphics of a little dog and a colourful Mini on it. I want heated controls that are easy and effective to use first time. I hope you listen one day. Take care, see you again soon for more videos. Yeah, a bit of a rant, negative video this one, but you know, why wouldn't I when we nearly had a bloody accident? And I don't like that at all. Thanks very much, see you again soon. More positive videos about the Mini Aceman coming soon, I think.